All right, welcome back to A Soccer Fan Walks Into a Bar. We have our good friend with Stream Punk Soccer, Scott Churchson. Scott, how you been?
Doing okay, man. How you holding up? Thanks for having me back. I
Oh,
appreciate it.
of course. I'm a little bit, international breaks always kind of are two-sided for me, especially in the middle of the MLS playoffs. It's
Mhm.
always been a bone to pick of mine that you and I could probably talk, ad nauseum about, for hours.
Absolutely.
But um, a lot of excitement here building around the playoffs. And for the first time in MLS history, we have a Hudson River Derby in the
Mhm.
playoffs. So, before we get into anything team specific, what are your thoughts on the first Hudson River Derby in the playoffs?
You know, it's funny. It's for the players themselves. They're going to talk about the fact that, and I think I agree with them. It's not really a Hudson River Derby to them that much. It's a playoff game.
Right.
Things like this. The rivalry matches and all that kind of stuff. It can add a little fire, but both sides know that this is 100% a win, move on, lose, and you're out. The best of three obviously was beneficial to both teams. Both RBNY and also
Yep.
NYCFC. But in this case here, they know in 2.5 hours, one team's going home, the other team's moving on. So I think the Derby part of it has a little less to do with it and more about just moving on to the Eastern Conference Finals, be it Atlanta, be it Orlando.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, speaking of Atlanta and Orlando, very surprised to have seen Miami get knocked off, which gives a lot of optimism. And we'll talk about that later. A lot of optimism to whoever wins out of this Hudson River Derby. Outside of potentially the two LA teams, you have
Yes.
to like anyone's chances out of the coming out of the East here.
It's weird because in this case here, I don't know when the last time was the first, the top three teams had been bounced in the first round. I mean, Inter Miami, honestly, I didn't expect them to get to the Eastern Conference Finals. I did. My pick was honestly was actually going to be Columbus, maybe FC Cincinnati,
Yeah.
but Inter Miami, I didn't see it because I just figured eventually, Messi was going to run out of gas,
Yeah. Yeah.
and you see what happened there. You see an upstart ninth round team, and they take it to a stunned Inter Miami squad. Despite Messi, Busquets, Campana, and all of the rest of them, and they have this Cinderella feel because they were the team that also ousted CF Montreal in Montreal as well.
Right.
So I don't know. I mean, it's curious in this case because their record historically playing in Orlando is 6 wins, 2 losses, 2 draws. They have had immensely good success playing on the road against Orlando. Will that make a difference next weekend? I don't know. But it's something definitely to look at and be like, you know what? Maybe Atlanta could go to the ECF despite the fact that it's ninth place overall.
Yeah, I mean, under their interim manager, whose name is escaping me, Rob Valentino.
Mhm.
They got hot at the right part of the season, and it really is obviously we're New York area here first and foremost, but it's a great story for I believe Atlanta was the first team to fire their manager this year,
Yep.
and look
Giacomakis,
look where they've come now. So.
and it's funny because it's interesting because also Atlanta is the most popular team in the league. If you look at attendance numbers year in and
Yeah,
year
I
out,
think I just saw they were 32nd in the world. I believe I just saw that
yeah,
stat.
they routinely every single year lead MLS in attendance. And it's honestly, it's really impressive because it's not the place you'd expect to see a number that high. You wouldn't
Right.
expect to see Charlotte number two either, for that matter. But it's it's nice to see. It's good for the fan base down there. And I don't really know what's going to happen. I think that's a 50-50 matchup there. I think, Gazan has done, a splendid job,
Yeah.
especially even keeping his cool when it had that whole second goal, that messy header and gets shoved into the net, and he was very professional about it.
Right.
That he was honest about the fact he wasn't crazy about it, but he was very professional. He didn't call the league out on the fact that there was no call on that. He gets straight shoved in the back and there was no yellow card. The rest of the league is like, that was a bad look for MLS not doing that.
Yeah.
He took the high road. He did the right thing. And at the end of the day, just being dunked by by a ninth place team and going home, Don Garber is probably pissed as heck. Because yeah,
Don Garber, Apple TV, I'm sure is not thrilled. There's a little bit of egg on the face of FIFA now
yeah,
after putting Inter Miami into the Club World Cup
yep.
under somewhat dubious criteria, but if we can take a good side of it, maybe this puts the rest of the league on display. Obviously you got 2 teams in LA left, you got 2 teams in the New York Metro left. So big markets, although it's not Miami, potential for a big market final, is still there. So let's jump right into the 2 teams that we have in this competition. We'll start with Red Bull. My co-host Diego and I, we talked almost weekly through the dog days of the summer with what is going wrong with Red Bull New York. They had 1 win out of their last 11 matches prior to beating Columbus back-to-back. Who are the Red Bulls? What are they, June to mid-September, or is this the Red Bull team that we know?
I don't really worry about the 1 out of 11. I know there's a lot of talk about that sort of thing, but it's about getting hot sometimes at the right time. I'm going to spin off and basically go into my New York Giants, my ever-suffering New York Giants. You look at 2 Super Bowls there. Did they have good seasons? No, they didn't. They were 10-6 and 9-7, but they knew how to they got hot at the right time. So you see a Red Bull team that beat Columbus, beat the MLS Cup champions, and the team that rolled in the Leagues Cup. And suddenly it's like, okay, they got, like I said, you get smart, you get hot at the right time. And again, it's one of these road teams that stuns the home crowd. You look at somebody like, say, Emil Forsberg. I know you and I talked a little bit about him previously. I looked up the stats on this, and I found this interesting. When he actually plays, let me pull up the numbers on this for a sec. There it is. When he actually plays, the team is 10 wins, 6 losses, and 5 draws. When he is not playing with the team, they're 1-3-9.
I actually didn't, not to interrupt you, I didn't realize Forsberg had played that much this year. It seemed like he was perpetually out on the sideline.
It was 21 games overall. I didn't look at it as whether he started or not. Just his very presence, was accountable for 10 of their 11 wins. Now, in this case, I also included the playoffs and also included that Game 3 penalty shootout as a win. Technically, it goes down as a draw, but I'm counting it as a win in this case because they won the game and they moved on, just under different circumstances. So, but you look at that kind of presence there where you have, like I said, 10 out of 11 wins has him being there. I think when you look at a team like this, I don't want to homer this as the guy who covers, NYCFC and has for the last 4 years. But I think playing into the factor that this is a game that's at Citi Field, which, interestingly enough, was not supposed to happen. There's a circus that's going on. There's renovations going on at Citi Field. And NYCFC kind of had to pull some strings a little bit to get Citi Field to say, okay, fine, we'll do it.
I'll be there, and I am not looking forward to finding parking. So let me put that out there.
Yeah, I'm kind of lucky. Actually, I can just arrange parking ahead of time. As a press person, I park in the Seaver lot, which is right there.
Maybe I'll catch a ride with you then.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'll come up to Newburgh, pick you up, and come back there.
Perfect.
But yeah, I mean, your case, it might even make sense to basically take public transit.
It's definitely a consideration for me for the weekend. I've done it a couple of times. It's a slog though. It's about 2.5 hours. So
yeah, and that's where it's not easy on my side, but it's definitely worse on yours. But what's interesting here is that NYCFC and Red Bulls have only played once at Citi Field, and NYCFC did win that game. But when it comes to basically what NYCFC will call home matches, they're 7 wins, 3 losses, and 2 draws. So they've had good success at home, wherever home might be for them, whether it's Yankee Stadium, whether it's Citi Field. What I was going to mention, and I've forgotten, I'm going to come back to it, is if they couldn't arrange it with Citi Field, then Red Bull Arena would have been actually the home stadium for NYCFC.
I was talking to a couple of people about it. I thought, Rentschler out in Hartford would have been the better option than going into Red Bull Arena. I can't imagine NYCFC would have had any interest unless Garber physically made them do it to play at Red Bull Arena in this match.
I mean, I personally, for me, Red Bull Arena would be a lot easier. Hartford is not the easy option for me, or for honestly any of the fans. I think for the fan base, most of which obviously is New York City based, Red Bull Arena, as much as difficult it is as a derby location, is probably easier for the fans to get to, because they can they can get down to 34th Street, they can take the path right into Harrison, and it drops you off right there.
Yeah,
Is
and
it
I would
convenient?
assume for a playoff game, NYCFC probably would have arranged some sort of busing or transportation to bring the crowd to Red Bull. But I'm with you on either point.
I personally don't mind it. I mean, it's a little weird on the parking front because usually I have to basically park like 3/4 of a mile away to get the free parking, and then I got to hoof it, and God help you if it rains. But so Citi Field is a good choice in this case. It has good energy, it has a good crowd, it has a good reverb, and I think the players generally, by and large, prefer the grass there than versus Yankee Stadium.
Yeah, I think from my years of going, I do think the experience is better. Personal pet peeve, although my seats are equivalent, I have a little bit of an obstructed view with a foul pole, but that's just my little anecdotal evidence. But yes, overall, whether it's concessions, whether it's the fan experience outside of the stadium prior, Citi Field is definitely the better experience for the fan.
Sure. It's just more difficult for you and me to get to.
Yeah. And the whole world should revolve around my conveniences.
Exactly, dude. I'm from Jersey. You're from upstate New York, and I'll count it as upstate because there's mountains involved.
How dare they?
Exactly, dude. Can you talk to Ted Doring and basically the guy that has that motorcycle museum?
Yeah.
He can probably just buy a stadium and just put one up there.
His motorcycle museum, or actually his bicycle museum, is about 2 blocks from here.
Nice.
And he's got the motorcycle museum, which is about 5 to 10 minutes away. But he's actually a relatively regular customer here at the brewery. We do a lot of fundraising events that he's a part of. So we're in certain circles together. So I've gotten to chat with Ted actually a few times.
Nice. Okay. Yeah, I was gonna say that's right in your neighborhood there. Ted, buy a stadium, put it up there.
It seems he's putting a lot of money into actually, which is something else that you could appreciate. A lot of film production.
Yes.
He's big into that right now. So.
Yeah. And that's where I think I know he owns a lot of the stages that are up there too, and that's easy money in this case. But the motorcycle museum, I want to take my father to eventually.
Oh, it's I'm not a motorcycle guy, but it is an absolutely must see type.
Even if you, like I said, I mean, I've been up there. It's like, Fonzie's motorcycle or the motorcycle from Terminator. It's like, you had some cool stuff.
Yeah.
Not just by the year, but like memorabilia too. So,
right.
But as far as, like I said, Yankee Stadium would have been easier for the two of us, but we'll take what we can get.
We'll do it. It beats, being home and watching, Orlando play Columbus, right?
Yeah.
So
exactly. So yeah, you take the good. In this case, also Yankee Stadium has Notre Dame college football.
Yes, yeah.
That's why, in case anybody's wondering why Yankee Stadium is out. So
all right. So we talked a little bit about Emil Forsberg. What has his injury recovery and kind of seamless inclusion back into the lineup? How has that impacted the squad, and what do we think he'll be capable of in this semifinal?
Like I said, it's just a lot of times it's just very simply his presence. 10 out. It's similar in some ways to like Lionel Messi, which I found, because when I've watched Lionel Messi, a lot of times he's very sluggish. He'll walk, he won't put a lot of effort in, but then flip it like a switch. And that anxiety of knowing someone like that is capable of doing that, and with somebody like Emil Forsberg, like I said, 10 of their 11 wins have come with him in the lineup. So his presence right there forces you to have to pay attention to him, because he didn't put up monster numbers. 12 goals, 6 assists, I think was his numbers. But like I said, the ability to open up the field, to open it up for Lewis, for everybody else that's there, he can do that kind of damage, and as a result, that's what you have to be worried about with a guy like him. It's not the threat of, like, say, him scoring, like, say, an Alonso Martinez. It's more of just what is he capable of doing pass-wise and danger-wise. And I think him being in the lineup will immediately make this a much more even matchup. If he's not, I would say NYCFC right off the bat.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. I was very hopeful for Red Bull from the start with this Forsberg transfer coming in. It seems to have bucked the trend in terms of bringing in more, I don't want to say middle-aged, but not a 19 and 20-year-old, but also not an aging star.
Sure.
That mid-level age-wise player that really outside. I mean, Beckham was still on the closer to the tail end of his career, but to bring in someone coming into their prime or in their prime from a European club that
Mhm.
had a big impact really is one of the first that we've had in this let's call it maybe MLS 3.0.
Yeah,
if
that
we're
works.
kind of counting there.
But yeah, in his first year, I have the actual numbers: 19 starts, 9 goals, 4 assists. And that does not include, by the way, the playoff games. But again, that's, like I said, a big difference right there in what he can do. But
Right.
he had good. But the only question is he is also 33 years old. He just turned 33 last month. So the question is how much does he have in the tank?
Right.
The problem that I'm finding with European players that come over is they're working on a different calendar than, say,
Exactly,
European or Premier League. And there's been some talk that MLS might move the schedule to be more in line to what Europe is doing. But as a result, it's generating some injury problems because they're going off their calendar and off their schedule. And these guys are so amazingly regimented
Right.
that even changes like that can cause hamstring injuries, early fatigue or anything like this. So he'll muscle through, he'll deal with it. But the league, I think, might push back, maybe in August to like May, or even like May to possibly January even.
Yeah. I forgive me, I didn't look, but I would assume he was not called in for the international break either. So maybe that week and a half break will kind of ground him a little bit and give him the opportunity to get back to full match fitness and health.
I think it's going to be good for both teams in this case because both of them played really long, drawn out, high stress three game setup there. In this case there was a week apart in them. There is 2 weeks apart between rounds, which I am not a fan of at all.
I'm with you.
I think as a result, I think both games. Actually, I will say I'm going to take it a step further. All 4 games, I think, are going to start out very sluggish, just because of the fact that these guys are a little bit iced, and it's going to take some time to get the legs under them. So you might have 20 or 25 minutes of literally nothing on these 4 games.
Right. Which is not unheard of in a one-off playoff game anyway. Nobody wants to make that first mistake.
But that would give give advantage to Red Bulls, though.
Right. Well,
NYCFC is notoriously a rough second half team. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Do you think the extra, we talk about the rest versus rust here. Do you think Red Bull winning in 2 games as opposed to NYCFC having that third match, do you think that could play more of an impact for Red Bull in a negative way?
I don't think so. Only because there's so much rest involved that both teams are really
on it. Yeah.
I think if it was a shorter one, maybe even a week, I would consider like that one day making a difference. But if you have 13 days of rest or 14 days of rest, it's not going to make a difference there. And I think as a result, both teams having that amount of time off is going to have both teams be a little bit, like I said, sluggish out of the gate as they just try to get their legs working again.
All right. Well, let's move on to the east side of the Hudson River with NYCFC. Throughout the summer, they've been kind of a tale of 2 teams, one of the most unpredictable sides in the league this year. What do you expect from them for this playoff match?
I think their biggest key is they're going to have to score first. NYCFC has historically struggled coming from behind, especially when they go into halftime behind. Like I think you and I talked about, these are 2 very, very young teams, but NYCFC is the younger of the 2. And as a result, they are a little bit more anxiety prone if they don't go into halftime with a lead.
Yeah.
And additionally, when they do go into halftime with the lead, they have a history of being a little sluggish and playing on their heels and playing out the clock a little more than they should. So the game that they had against FC Cincinnati at Citi Field, they went up in half 2-0 and then just kind of played back a little bit. Cincy drew it to 2-1, and it was tight for a long time until, there's a penalty kick by Santi Rodriguez to make it 3-1 and end it. But they kind of get in their head a little bit right now, and I think it's a youth thing. It's a youth and immaturity thing that they're going to adapt to in the next year, 2025 and 2026. But for right now, as a team, they have to score first. This is a team that's very strong that way. Again, this is where I think part of their challenge could be coming out of the gate if they're a little icy early on. Could this go into penalty kicks? Very possible. When you look at somebody like Alonso Martinez, then up front with him, Santi and Hannes Wolf, they are a very strong, very good tandem there, throwing Maxi Morales as well. But Alonso Martinez is an absolute gem of a find. He was not supposed to be a striker. He was just some dude who's a forward, and they're like, you know what, this is kind of working. Let's leave him in there, and bam, 16 goals.
Yeah.
In the regular season. So
Second only to Lionel Messi in terms of goals per 90, which is
exactly, I know,
an absolutely incredible stat.
Monstrous, and his fastest goals in club history. This is the kind of stuff that they have a diamond in the rough. Will he put up these numbers next year? I don't think so. I could see 13 or 14 goals from it, but I think the offseason, I think the teams are going to be able to adapt to him a little bit more. But I think he'll have a good year, not the Cinderella year he's having, but for right now, him and Santi Rodriguez have worked as a very, very good tandem there, and like I said, Hannes Wolf as well. And their backfield is solid. Their midfield has some question marks and some challenges, but I have always liked the tandem. I'm going to put the four in this case: Martinez, Santi Rodriguez, Hannes Wolf, and Maxi Morales, who I would venture to say this is probably his last season. I think he's done after this. He's 37. Eventually, the wheels start to break down after a while.
Yeah, and obviously, missing the year with the knee injury, kind of at this point, just getting back really from what I'm seeing to match fitness and able to play 60, 75 minutes. But even that, it tends to be a stretch for him, to meet the tempo of the rest of the game.
Yes.
For a full 90.
I've actually had reporters from Argentina ask me, why hasn't he retired yet?
Yeah.
And it was just straight up at a press conference. It's like, why is he still there? It's like, there's a lot to him where, it's the locker room presence, that veteran leadership. After him, Thiago Martins is the oldest player on that team, and he's 29.
He's 29. I did look that up. So, yeah. Maxi is the only player on the roster 30 or older.
Yeah. And you have, you need him to be that gel. Their head coach, Nick Cushing, just turned 40 last weekend. So he is still young by most standards. But, you look at, Christian McFarland, you look at, Malachi Jones, who is iffy. He had the broken leg, but if he comes back, he's young. He's going to be hungry. Even Matt Freese is just 26.
Yeah.
So you have a very young roster for the most part there. And like I said, amazingly, Maxi Morales is the only player on that squad who's over the age of 29 and a half.
Yeah. So actually, you just mentioned all three of them in the last couple of minutes. Obviously, you and I, probably me more so than you have a little bit more of a worldly view of the MLS. Where do what I've been kind of calling the big three for NYCFC, although Santi likes to play out wide, pretty much the spine here of Matt Freese, Santi Rodriguez, and Alonso Martinez. What are the eyes around the league? Think of them. Is it just our New York-centric views that have them maybe among the tops in the league in their positions, or is that something that the rest of the MLS has recognized?
I think the rest of the league has noticed, because you put up those kind of numbers that they have, and you realize you have a very strong 1-2 tandem. You talked about the fact that goals per 90, Alonso Martinez is second behind Lionel Messi. For a 25-year-old kid, that is definitely something the league is aware of. And as a result, it's something that they are obviously very, very cognizant of. With a match like this with, Red Bulls and everything, it's stopping Alonso is going to be the big key, because NYCFC, I think right now, and I forget if it's 8-2-2 or 9-2-2 when Alonso Martinez scores a goal. It's a big number. And I think on all the games that Santi has an assist, they never lost this season.
Yep.
So there's such a big key with those two that you have to be able to stop those guys. When it comes to Matt Freese is, my opinion, the MVP of the team. Because without his goaltending presence, without his skill set back there, and his very zen mentality. Some goalkeepers are hot, they're fiery, they're angry, things like that. He has this very, I'm almost going to say borderline Phil Jackson approach to it. Very, like I said, very zen.
Yep.
And you see a guy like him, he's able to control the backfield a lot more. And his reaction time is incredible. His personality, like I said, gels really well. And he has adapted to the NYCFC format better. He was trained when he was the backup in Philadelphia, he was trained to always play back. But he had to learn how to play forward,
right.
Which when he was in high school, I think he was a midfielder or a forward. I think he was a
Okay.
midfielder in high school. So he has some familiarity with playing up a little bit, but he had to learn a new system, which is why it took a little while for him to get his
Yeah, I
legs
mean,
going.
just from my standpoint, obviously I don't recall which game it was, but he had a little bit of a muscle injury about 15, 20 minutes into a game a couple months ago, and I at that point I thought they were done. I still think even with the emergence of Alonso Martinez and just the leadership and skill of Santi, I think NYCFC go as far as Matt Freese can take them. And it was a noticeable difference just in that game alone, but even going back last year, the comfort of the back line, whether it's a back three or a back four, the comfort of them with Matt Freese as opposed to a Luis Barraza, it's drastically different.
I mentioned before about Matt Freese being very zen. Luis Barraza is very yelly. He does a lot of yelling. He does a lot of screaming. But I had asked, first conversation I ever had with Matt Freese a year and a half ago, I asked him very simply, just casual for the fans now, DC or Marvel? And he said neither, Asimov. So he goes science fiction. He goes into like really just things that kind of expand his brain. So he doesn't really focus on the same things that, like, say, a normal person would. Barraza is big into Call of Duty. He told me outright, Call of Duty. Right. So his thought process, like I said, is very zen. And as a result, it calms a youthful backfield there, many of whom are, 20, 21, 22 years old, and I mean, Tavon's only 23, I think, James Sands is in his early 20s as well. And it helps stabilize a lot of that. But also with his speed, and he's always been this season towards the top or occasionally at the top in the save percentage. So the fact that he was not in the MVP voting or in the goalkeeper of the year voting, I think gave a little bit of a chip on his shoulder because it's undeservedly so.
As it should. I mean, there obviously there's been some great goalkeeping this year. Obviously, again, like we said, we have a pretty tunneled view on our local teams, but obviously watching all the games that you and I do, we see the other goalkeepers as well.
Yep.
I would put them right up there with them. I got a chance to actually chat with him briefly at a training session, and you're very humble, very high work ethic. He's not a screamer. He's more of a lead by example guy, which is sometimes a little bit odd from a goalkeeper when you need to organize things very quickly. But he also has that ability to turn it on when it needs to be done.
Yeah. And I think that helps, especially in a single elimination, because a lot of these players have never been through a single elimination. A lot of these players never had a playoff game before.
Right.
And in his case, his only playoff game prior to NYCFC was the 2021 Eastern Conference Final, where he was the backup goalkeeper who played for Philadelphia and lost to NYCFC.
That was the Andre Blake COVID birthday party.
Yep. Don't go to a birthday party for your player if COVID is a possibility.
Yep. Philly fans will still claim there was something afoot on that declaration, but can only beat the team you play against, and they still barely made it out alive in that NYCFC Philly game. That was wild.
Sometimes luck basically trumps good skill set. But yeah, no, I think in this case I would give logical advantage NYCFC because it is a home crowd in this case. You will get some bridge and tunnel people coming across from Harrison, granted, but there is also a limit because of the renovation of how many fans you can actually have in this game. I think the limit is 22,000. Yep. So under normal circumstances, you could have 28, 29, 30,000 for this.
Yeah, I believe they have the whole second level locked off.
Yeah, so everybody's going to come down low. It's almost like basically going to a Tropicana, a Rays game at Tropicana Field before obviously what everything happened. where they just shut down the entire upper tier.
Yeah.
But it's still going to be a good crowd. It's going to be a packed crowd. I think it's going to be a violent crowd too. I think these guys are going to get drunk. I think there's going to be some fights breaking out. As long as they leave me alone up top, I'm happy.
Right, yeah. That's why I like to stay. And that's one of the things I love about my season tickets. I know where I'm going to be every game. I don't have to, fight through anything and deal with any of that. So, we talked Freeze, and then you said something about a shootout, and it spurred my memory here. That game 3, was that not the worst shootout you've ever seen?
It was a little anxiety-inducing, I'm not going to lie.
five consecutive missed
Yeah.
penalties between both teams. It's ridiculous to me that, again, I know there's a lot of pressure on them. They're playing against professional goalkeepers, but
I think
they're
it's one of
supposed to be
those.
the best in the league, and this is what we get.
It's the pressure of knowing you can clinch it. It's tough enough in the moment, but knowing that you can finish the job, I think gets into your head a little bit too.
Yeah.
End result. NYCFC did end up pulling off the win, but that could have easily gone either way. And
I can't remember the last time I yelled as much at the TV. It just
and ironically enough, that was the day Nick Cushing turned 40 years old too.
Well, a good thing he has no hair already, because he probably would have lost it on that one.
Dude, you know what? I mean, he technically does have a little bit of hair up there. He's got a little stubble that I think he just kind of shaves, but it grows out every now and again. But you got to work to see it.
Yeah.
Dude, are you surprised? I mean, a job like that?
I can't. I mean, I coached at the college level for a few years, and that was enough anxiety for me. People ask me why I don't bet on soccer because I know so much about the game. Because I have enough anxiety just watching. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
All right, so let's switch things up a little bit. Instead of talking about each team individually, we've kind of hinted at both squads. They are the two youngest squads in the MLS this year. I believe NYCFC has an average age of like 23.7, and I think Red Bull is at 23.9. So two extremely young squads, and we've had plenty of ups and downs between both of them. Who has the brighter future here, in the next, let's say, 2 to 4 years, and why do you think that?
I would give the edge myself to NYCFC because this is a team that there was a lot of growth from last season. Not so much basically in the early part of it when they're trying to figure things out. Sean Johnson left, Chanot became a problem, which now people are starting to realize, okay, you know what, maybe there was some difficulty there. And the team was in a little bit of a flux, but got 13 points in his last 8 games to at least make a run and make it interesting for the playoff spot. But the team they didn't really make a ton of moves because they wanted the team to kind of gel and grow together. Brad Sims has talked about the fact that this is designed as a 2025-26 team and let them just go through the growing pains of just working together. You had so many players that came in last season, that had no familiarity with each other. A lot of them mid-season. Monsef Bakrar, who I will be a defender of, not going to lie. Martinez came in midway through.
That makes one of us.
I know, dude. I know. I am alone on that island.
I tried to give him as much of a rope as I could. I famously got into a couple arguments on Reddit about it.
Possibly with me at some point. I wouldn't be surprised.
Expected goals is not goals.
Yeah.
I can get into good positions on the field. It doesn't mean I'm going to score them.
Sure.
So that's just my little piece on Bakrar. I know he's got a very high work rate. It does seem like the squad and the coaching staff is behind him.
Mm-hmm.
But we're in a results-driven business, and he's not bringing them.
I think when it looks to someone like Bakrar, I think the potential is there. Maybe it requires a change of scenery. I don't know. A fresh, some good. Because if you look at like say Tyler Magno, Tyler struggled up here and then went back down to Brazil and actually had some good success. I think in his particular case, it was the fact that he was also back on his home turf and not freezing his butt off.
Yep.
But with somebody like him, with somebody like Jovan, who's under contract till 2028 and is also very young, or Micha, who's 19, you have these guys who are designed to grow and build together. And that's where, additions and changes were made in 2025. But I like the direction the team is going in. Could they have done better than just a 9-point improvement? Yes. I did predict them for 6, so I will slightly pat myself on the back. But I expected more points out of them, so I am wrong on that one. But I think for 2025 and 2026, I think the team is pretty much poised and ready to really make a run at the top 3. It just took a little time to get them, familiar. Now, is Nick Cushing going to be with the team next season? I don't know. There's been some talk about him going to Arsenal Women.
Yep, he seemed to have pretty quickly, squashed that. But where there's smoke, there's fire usually. And I can't imagine a world in which an MLS manager has an agent kind of working behind the scenes to bring things for more money. I'm not. I don't think we're at that level just yet.
Obviously he's quick to basically talk about the fact it's not going to be an option, but it's what he has to say right now. You're not supposed to basically say, yeah, we're looking into that in the middle of a playoff run.
Right.
You can't do that. So could it happen? Yes. Will it happen? I don't know. He has roots to the New Jersey area. He lives in Bridgewood, New Jersey. So he's been there for a while. The family's been there. So it's a lot more about his kids, his wife.
Right. I believe his son plays for NYCFC Academy as well.
Yes.
A couple buddies of mine have kids that play in the academy, and they mentioned that. So
so he has strong roots here. Will the deal with Arsenal be enough? I don't know. For me personally, I see it as 50-50. If he goes over to Arsenal for my company, I could see it as a win because now I got a tie to Arsenal right now.
There you go.
I can get my guys into Arsenal always. But who knows what's going to happen there? But I think it all depends a lot on the season and what he and his family want to do.
Yeah. All right. Last and maybe most importantly, we're not huge on it on this show, but when we have an opportunity like this, why not? Scoreline prediction for next Saturday.
I knew you were going to go that way. I usually am a jinxer, but I'm going to go with it anyway. I could see NYCFC pulling off a 2-1 win here, or maybe a 1-1 with if it goes 1-1, I think it's a shootout 50-50 either way. But history has proven that NYCFC is better at home than Red Bull are. I think the team is riding. Both teams are riding extremely high right now, but that home field advantage I think is going to be a massive, massive factor here, and the limited amount of tickets is also going to be a factor because a lot of basically Red Bull fans are not going to necessarily be able to buy tickets because they're limiting it because of what Citi Field is doing. Will the Red Bull fan base be like Call Conspiracy? Yes, they will. I'm sure they if they haven't already, and I get it, I do. But you have to look at the home crowd. You have to look at the excitement on something like this and the raw energy and emotion that's going on at Citi Field. So I would give NYCFC the advantage. However, I think whichever team scores first has an 85% chance of winning. So if RBNY scores first, then NYCFC's got a 15% chance of pulling off the win because they're not because they're not a strong team when it comes to coming back from behind.
I think you nailed that. It's one of these. Obviously, this is why they play games on the field and not on a StreamYard podcast here. But my gut tells me it's going to be close. But would it surprise me if there's another? I don't think Red Bull has it in their bag, but it wouldn't surprise me if NYCFC jumps out and with a 3 or 4 goal win. Obviously I'm hopeful, but. They are capable of that. And, once they get those, wheels moving with NYCFC, especially if we get an early goal from Alonso Martinez, like he tends to do so much, I think Red Bull will be in big trouble.
Again, like I said, it depends on who scores first right here. Could they do 3 goals, 4 goals? Maybe. But NYCFC is statistically a stronger first half team than second half team. And again, if both teams are coming out of the gate sluggish, that could actually hurt NYCFC to get that early lead because they're still trying to get the legs going. The weather is not going to be, it's not going to be really warm. So you have to worry about muscle injury, hamstring injuries. So will that become a factor on either side? Yes, very possible. A lot of these players have never really had experience playing in November, basically borderline mid-late November. Yeah. So you have to worry about cramping as well.
All right. So any surprise players that you see kind of making a big impact on the game? Or do you think it'll be the usual suspects, the Lewis Morgans, the Forsbergs, the Santis, Alonso Martinez?
I think it's going to be the staples, for the most part in this case here, because they're the ones that are going to get the ball. I think, like I said, I think when it comes right down to it, it's the guys versus the surprise ones. Monsef Bakrar is probably not going to be picking up a goal here. But could Alonso Martinez? Yeah. Could Santi basically, that front line there, could Forsberg, Morgan, and those guys do it? Yes. Because who would you want in a situation like this except them?
Yeah. I agree. We talked a little bit briefly earlier about all the upsets on the Eastern side, including, we didn't mention it, but Orlando needed a 96-minute goal just to draw things level and then win in a shootout. Otherwise, it would have been all upsets on the East Conference. What do you expect, regardless of who it is? Because I would agree. I think both teams, in terms of league-wide competition, are fairly even. The winner of this semifinal, what do you think they're capable of, across the MLS Cup?
You're talking about the East right now?
Just the winner of the NYCFC Red Bull match. Do they make it past the winner of Orlando Atlanta? Do they surprise someone and win the MLS Cup?
I don't see an MLS Cup, I'll be honest. Could I see an Eastern Conference final, or basically a trip to the MLS final? Yes, I do. I think Orlando is a beatable team. Atlanta, it's still a ninth seed. I mean, they've had a great Cinderella run. At some point, the clock will strike midnight.
Right.
But I think either one of those teams, I think, is capable of going to the MLS Cup final and facing one of the LA teams is personally my pick. It's boring in this case, but I think one of the LA teams, because LA would love to cap off basically the Dodgers World Series win with an MLS Cup win again, and have another one of those in this case. But I think, could they beat LAFC or the Galaxy? Probably not.
No.
But getting to the finals is not a bad thing either, especially with, like we talked about, both NYCFC and RBNY are very, very young. Yeah. It gives them a hunger going into the future and gives them, enough pain to realize basically they could have gotten there, but at the same time, the hunger to realize, what, we did a damn good job of where we are.
You took the words right out of my mouth. I think both teams, just having survived and escaped that first round 3-game series, will go a long way to the culture of both clubs, as they mature more. Mm-hmm. So you talk about now on the West side, it's probably going to be one of the two LA teams. Obviously, surprises can happen. I understand why they do it logistically and travel wise. In what world would we get rid of conferences and have the potential of an LA Derby MLS Cup final? How exciting do you think that would be?
You're talking like one gigantic league. I would be more interested in it because you would have the opportunity to see teams you never get to see.
Right.
When's the last time NYCFC played, Colorado? It's interesting that way, but you have to look at it from the travel standpoint, which I think is part of the problem too.
For sure.
There has been some challenges as far as the scheduling has gone, and I've had conversations with Brad Sims about this, about the league's plan to stretch out and change the schedule so it's not all 7:30 on a Saturday night, and take more of an NFL approach where you could have a Friday, 3 Saturdays, a couple of Sundays.
I think that would be in Apple's best interest also. One of my biggest issues is, people that are paying for Apple TV are either a huge fan of just their team or a fan of the MLS. And with all these games in the same time slot, it's impossible to watch anything else. I tried the MLS 360 thing here and there. It doesn't really do it for me.
I've never watched anything.
Yeah, I'm not, I can't bounce around too much. But it's the same, I do the same thing. I don't really like the, what do they call it for Champions League? The Golasso show. It's very well done, but it's not for me. I want to watch games.
I'd rather, when it comes to stuff like that, I'd rather watch YouTubers anyway.
Right.
MLS Moves, I'm going to give him a shout out because he's got really good content when it comes to stuff like this. But I'd rather watch that and just some dude in a basement who's just really passionate about it. But
as we both talk from basement or
basement. But yeah, as far as, like I said, Apple TV, I've never really watched, 360. I've never really watched. I mean, I've watched a couple previews here and there, but I haven't really put a lot of time into something like that. But I think Apple is also using MLS as a training ground to be like, what? We can take on the NFL. Oh, and by the way, our streaming system is better than Netflix.
Oh boy. They're all over the news lately as well.
Yeah, I watched that fight too, and it was like, oh, yeah. I had to switch from the TV to my laptop because
I believe it.
Yeah, because I just couldn't watch it on the TV because it was just taking up too much bandwidth, and Netflix couldn't handle it.
It's wild to me for the amount of money involved in stuff like that. Although you could say the same about Apple, they to their credit, they've much improved in year 2. But early last year, it was not a great medium to take in soccer games. So,
but all in all, I think the quality has been very good. I think it's been crisp video. It's been a good stream. I've never really seen a lag that I can think of. And yeah, I mean, this is year 2 of a 10-year deal.
Yeah.
So, but they're trying, like I said, they're trying to use it because they want NBA, they want NFL,
right?
They already have MLB to some degree, but
it's there for the taking. Whether it's more American sports, whether it's approaching into some of the other European competitions, the sky is the limit for some of these streaming networks. So
absolutely,
that's going to do it for me, Scott. I do appreciate it very much. Where can we find you?
Streampunk Entertainment, basically Streampunk Soccer is one of the YouTube channels. We'll talk about that one specifically.
And if you have passions outside of soccer, where can we find you and your company?
In this case, Streampunk Entertainment, StreampunkENT.com is the main website. But at this point, we also cover, National Lacrosse, the Grey Cup, Canadian football we're moving into a little bit right now. A lot of Big East basketball. So, Seton Hall, Villanova, St. John's, we just did our first game. So our company is really focused on what we call the second tier or the niche sports. So we don't get like NBA, NFL, but we get those ones that are kind of like a level below, but have enough of a fan base to be like, I'm checking it out.
Yep.
The ones that don't get the attention.
Need more coverage.
Yeah. The ones that don't get the attention. It wasn't designed that way, but it sort of fell into it. So like I said, with MLS, lacrosse, robot combat sports. I mean, even things like local wrestling, local MMA, local boxing, we do stuff like that as well. So there's a lot of, like I said, the second tier stuff. At some point, if I ever decided to change the company name, I would change it to maybe second tier sports.
There you go.
So
make sure you get a trademark on that before anyone else that watches.
Oh my God, yeah.
All right, well, Scott, thanks again. Hopefully, one of these days we can get you up here in person and have a couple beers and chat soccer. And maybe I'll bump into you next Saturday at the match. And but if I don't, enjoy it and selfishly, hopefully we get an NYCFC victory. And I wouldn't mind another home match against Atlanta. So
if Atlanta wins, yeah,
for all that.
I think every team in the West, by the way, has a better record than NYCFC.
Yeah, I was looking. Even Minnesota, who's a 6th seed, is still ahead of NYCFC. I had my hopes up for the possibility of an MLS Cup final in a baseball field, but
because the rest of the world would love that.
Yes. You know what? Nothing could be more MLS though. I think I joke around. I tell people if the new NYCFC stadium doesn't have a pitching mound on it, I don't want to be it. I don't want to be there.
I've seen the 3D design of it. Actually, it does not have a pitching mound in the middle. Anywhere, it's a gorgeous. The
renderings I've seen look absolutely incredible. I think, not to get off on a tangent, but I think not just for an MLS perspective. I think it has the potential to be one of the top soccer stadiums in the world.
Absolutely.
It's a smaller stadium. I believe it's in the seat about 25,000.
25, sure.
But the whole atmosphere. With everything else that's going on with the project and obviously Citi Field right there. I don't envy a September home game when you have the U.S. Open and the Mets to compete with. But from a general fan standpoint, that would be a mecca for the neighborhood there. So
yeah, it's honestly, like I said, I saw the 3D rendering. The model itself, myself, Brad Sims, Roberto Abramowitz, Trey Fillmore, a bunch of us were invited up. It is a really good looking stadium. Yeah. Very excited by the look of it.
That cube gives me a little bit of vertigo. I will say that, but
yeah, if they call it the cube, I think the fans will be happy with that too.
Yep. So, all right. Well, thanks again. And like I said, hopefully we get to see you in person very soon. And, for those of you that are just here for me, please give a follow or take a look at some of the content for Streampunk Soccer and Streampunk Entertainment. And we'll see you again next week.
By the way, I should also mention player press conferences are on that YouTube channel.
Perfect.
So if you want to see Nick Cushing and the players in the press conferences, I have them up there. So
absolutely
worth a mention as a quick note.
No, that's perfect because I do think that's again to go back to what you said, a very underserved medium. Even for some of the Red Bull stuff and some other teams, you really have to seek it out. So,
Yep.
so you are doing God's work by making it more accessible to everyone else via YouTube. So
Compliment I don't deserve, but I'm grateful just the same.
Well, thank you again, Scott, and we'll catch you again soon. All right, take care.
Sounds good. Be good.